Mirror Talk Episode 4. You Never Listen. Welcome back to Mirror Talk, the language of the nervous system. If you've been traveling with me through this first season, you'll know that our work here isn't about mastering language in the grammatical sense. It's about remembering that language is alive. It lives in the body before it lives in the mouth. We don't simply speak words, we transmit states. In our last episode, The Apology Loop, we explored how sorry can become a survival code, a reflex born of nervous system appeasement rather than genuine accountability. We traced how over-apology often hides a deeper longing for safety, and how through regulation, awareness, and reframing, it can evolve into a language of sincerity and self-respect. Today, we turn our attention to another familiar phrase, one that reverberates across relationships, workplaces, families, and friendships. You never listen. A sentence that cuts deeper than it seems. It's not an accusation about ears. It's a statement about safety, validation, and connection. When we say, you never listen, what we often mean is, you don't see me, you don't register my truth. You hear the words, but not the weight. In a world of overlapping conversations, digital chatter, constant notifications, and opinion economies, true listening has become a rare resource. Not because we lack time, but because we lack capacity. Listening requires stillness, and stillness requires regulation. The physiology of listening is not passive. It's an active neurobiological process. When we feel safe, our social engagement system, as described by Stephen Porges in polyvagal theory, activates the muscles of the face and middle ear. The eyes soften, the head tilts slightly, the ear literally attunes to human frequencies. We hear nuance, tone, meaning, but when we sense a threat, even a subtle threat, our physiology shifts. The muscles tighten, the breath shortens, and our focus narrows. The middle ear loses sensitivity to certain frequencies. It filters for danger. Suddenly, what we're hearing isn't content, it's cues. Our body is scanning not for meaning, but for risk. This is why arguments rarely resolve through more words. Both systems are transmitting, but neither is receiving. Conflict becomes an echo chamber, two nervous systems looping through defense scripts, each shouting louder in the hope of being understood. In this state, listening collapses into monitoring. We don't hear the other person, we listen for threat, evidence, contradiction, and control. The conversation becomes an arms race between egos disguised as ears. The mirror linguistic hypothesis, applied to listening according to the mirror linguistic hypothesis. MLH, my conceptual hypothesis and spine of mirror talk. Every word reflects the speaker's internal state. This reflection works in both directions. Language reveals the speaker, and the act of listening reveals the listener. In regulated dialogue, reflection is clear. Each person mirrors presence, not projection. But under stress, the mirror distorts. Tone, timing, and semantics bend under the weight of nervous system activation. You never listen, then becomes both a description and a confession. I can't feel heard while I'm bracing. This insight reframes conflict entirely. Communication breakdowns aren't moral failings, they're physiological misalignments. The words you never listen often emerge from a body in defense, reaching for resonance through blame. To restore understanding, we must decode not only what is said, but how the body is saying it. Everyday scenarios, hidden scripts. We encounter this dynamic in ordinary moments. A partner interrupts mid-sentence, convinced they know where the story is going. A colleague raises their voice, interpreting feedback as an attack. A parent, exhausted, hears a child's request as criticism. A friend withdraws mid-conversation, retreating into silence rather than risking misstep. In each scene, listening fails not from lack of care, but from state mismatch. One person speaks from vulnerability. The other listens from vigilance. Words cross paths but never meet. Language becomes theatre. Gestures of understanding performed by systems still on guard. The ears function, but the nervous system does not receive. Defensive dialogue, the syntax of survival. When dysregulated, our speech follows predictable grammatical patterns, defensive linguistics, absolute you always, you never, mind reading, I know what you're going to say. Negation loops, I'm not angry, I didn't mean that, reversal phrases. You're the one who. These structures serve emotional logic, not linguistic precision. They are protective code, attempts to reclaim power, deflect shame, or preempt hurt. From the NSL perspective, such phrases signal a body defending its narrative coherence. The mind may argue semantics, but the tone betrays the motive. Keep control, avoid collapse. In these moments, listening becomes impossible, because both parties are speaking to states, not to sense. The four listening states conflict listening tends to follow four autonomic patterns, mirrors of the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses. Fight listener, hears to counter, interrupts, corrects, debates. Flight listener, detaches, nods politely while planning escape. Freeze listener, blanks, words wash over them without integration. Fawn listener, agrees excessively, mirrors tone to preserve approval. Each mode is adaptive, a learned survival grammar, but each also distorts perception. The fight listener hears challenge where there is curiosity. The fawn listener hears obligation where there is invitation. To shift from reaction to reception, we must first identify the state behind the stance. Listening is co-regulation in nervous system language (NSL). Listening is regulation. The most healing response to "you never listen" is not defense, but stillness. A slow breath, soft tone, open posture. These gestures tell the other body, "You're safe to continue. I'm not preparing to strike, I'm preparing to understand." True listening doesn't start with comprehension. It starts with containment. The ability to stay steady while another person's nervous system releases its truth. This is why silence can be more communicative than speech. Silence without withdrawal, paired with presence, signals capacity. It says, "I can hold this with you," without correcting it immediately. The function of projection. When someone cries, "You never listen," they may be projecting, expressing an unmet internal need. Projection, as Jung framed it, is the psyche's way of disowning discomfort by locating it elsewhere. In mirror linguistic terms, projection is a sentence that points outward while describing inward reality. So "you never listen" can also mean, "I don't feel heard by myself. I've stopped listening to my own boundaries. I'm overwhelmed by the noise of content, but in calm." So when the accusation arises, "You never listen," we can meet it not with rebuttal, but with reflection. "I want to. Show me how you need me to hear." This sentence reopens the channel. It shifts the focus from proving comprehension to building connection. Entering the echo chamber. In this episode, we'll slow the dialogue down. We'll step inside the echo chamber of conflict and examine what happens when bodies, not just minds, stop listening. We'll decode the physiology of defensive dialogue, explore projection as self-communication, and practice tools for recalibrating resonance. Because listening is more than a skill, it's a state. And every state can be softened, synchronized, rewritten. Let's begin. The echo chamber. Every conversation carries two parallel frequencies. The one made of words and the one made of waves, heart rate, breath rhythm, facial expression, tension, and tone. When we say, "You're not listening," we're often describing a break not in comprehension, but in coherence. The sound is landing, but the signal is scrambled. To understand this, we have to step into the echo chamber, a psychological and physiological space where words circle back distorted by defense. In this chamber, both parties may be speaking, but neither is being heard. The mechanics of mishearing. At its core, listening is a neurophysiological act. The ventral vagal system, part of the parasympathetic branch, regulates our capacity for social engagement. When active, it fine-tunes the tiny muscles of the middle ear, allowing us to detect the frequencies of human speech, particularly the emotional nuances carried in prosody. But the moment the body senses threat, real or perceived, this system begins to shut down. The ears, designed to attune to connection, shift to protection. Lower frequencies, like the growl of a predator or the rumble of traffic, dominate. Higher frequencies, including the warmth in someone's voice, fade into the background. The result, we literally hear differently when we're afraid. A calm sentence can sound critical. A neutral word can register as sharp. A pause can feel like withdrawal. This is the first layer of the echo chamber, the physiological distortion of auditory processing. The body narrows its bandwidth, and the mind builds stories to fill the gaps. Emotional filters and defensive focus layer 2 emerges from cognitive distortion, the way past experiences shape present perception. When our amygdala, the brain's threat detector, associates certain tones, phrases, or gestures with danger, we begin to listen for evidence of harm. In this state, listening becomes pattern matching, not presence. We stop hearing what is said and start hearing what we fear will be said. This is how ordinary disagreements spiral into emotional flashbacks. Someone raises their voice slightly, and the body leaps to an old conclusion. I'm being attacked. Someone pauses before replying, and the chest tightens. They're withdrawing. Someone says, I disagree, and the stomach drops. I'm being rejected. When both bodies are doing this simultaneously, the conversation collapses under mirrored mistrust. The echo chamber amplifies not content, but conditioning, mutual dysregulation. It's tempting to believe that in any conflict, there is one calm party and one reactive one. But in truth, most conflicts are co-created through co-activation. When one voice rises, the other's nervous system matches. When one person withdraws, the other's anxiety spikes. When one rushes to fix, the other feels unheard. This mirroring of state is not moral failure, it's biological synchrony. Humans are designed for attunement, but when fear leads, attunement becomes contagion. Instead of co-regulation, we get co-dysregulation, each body echoing the other's alarm, reinforcing the very cues that keep both in defense. The louder one speaks, the less the other can hear. The quieter one becomes, the louder the silence feels. Every gesture meant to resolve instead reactivates. In the echo chamber, communication transforms into choreography, a dance of threat responses where every move is misread, language under pressure. The syntax of stress is predictable. Under activation, our language simplifies, polarizes, and hardens. We default to absolutes. You always, you never, you don't care. We rely on categoricals. That's wrong. That's not what happened. We use deflection. You're twisting my words. We employ retroactive justification. I only said that because these patterns aren't random. They are linguistic equivalents of fight or flight. The mind narrows its vocabulary just as the body narrows its hearing. Subtlety, nuance, curiosity, all vanish. In fight mode, words are weapons, sharp, pointed, escalating. In flight, words become evasive, vague, detached, disappearing mid-thought. In freeze, speech stalls altogether, pauses grow heavy. In fawn, words rush to please, over-agreeing in an attempt to restore harmony. Each pattern communicates state first, sense second. So when someone says, "You never listen," stepping out of the chamber. If the echo chamber is where sound multiplies and meaning fractures, the next part is about restoring signal fidelity. We'll now explore how nervous systems in dialogue reflect each other's state, how fight hears fight, fawn hears demand, freeze hears overwhelm, and how awareness of these patterns can transform misunderstanding into mutual regulation. Because before we can truly listen, we must recognize which part of us is doing the listening. Let's move into state reflection. Nervous systems in dialogue. Every conversation is a nervous system exchange. Before logic, before language, two bodies meet. Each scans the other, silently asking, "Am I safe here?" If the answer is yes, dialogue becomes discovery. If the answer is no, dialogue becomes defense. This is the invisible grammar of human interaction, a set of pre-verbal rules that govern what our words can do. When we say someone isn't listening, what we often mean is that their state isn't receptive. The words are entering the room, but the body is closed. Understanding this begins with recognizing that listening is state-dependent. Every nervous system listens through its current mode of survival, and in moments of tension, these modes narrow perception to match the body's priority: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Listening is state. The autonomic nervous system determines our readiness for connection. When calm, the ventral vagal state supports curiosity. Our ears and eyes stay open, breath steady, and mind flexible. But when a threat is detected, our physiology shifts. What we hear, how we interpret, and even the pace at which we process meaning all change. To understand another, we must first ask, which state am I listening from? Which state might they be speaking from? When these differ, understanding breaks down. One voice might be pleading from a fawn, while the other is posturing from a fight. One might be freezing, unable to respond, while the other assumes indifference. Each state has its own syntax, tone, and threshold for nuance. Let's decode them. The fight listener, hearing to counter. When in fight mode, listening becomes combative comprehension. The ears stay open only long enough to collect material for rebuttal. The focus narrows to perceived inaccuracies, threats, or inconsistencies. From a physiological standpoint, the body is mobilized, heart rate elevated, jaw tense, adrenaline spiking. The listener's attention is no longer on meaning, but on control. They interrupt not from arrogance, but from urgency. Every pause feels like danger, a space in which the other might win. Linguistic patterns of fight listening. Frequent correction. "That's not what I said." Counter statements. "But you always know you're wrong." Overemphasis on logic at the expense of empathy. From a mirror linguistic hypothesis perspective, fight mode distorts reflection. Words bounce back sharpened, not softened. The mirror becomes a shield. To exit this mode, the key is slowing the breath and expanding curiosity. Replace correction with clarification. "Can you say more about what you meant?" It's a shift from combat to comprehension. The flight listener, hearing for escape in flight, the listener's priority is distance. They may appear calm, even agreeable, but attention drifts. The mind is already halfway out the door, crafting exit strategies or rehearsing disengagement. The body signals withdrawal. Eyes avert, breath quickens, posture angles away. Words are registered, but only superficially. The message becomes background noise. Common linguistic cues, short vague responses. "Yeah, maybe, I guess." Subject changes or humor to deflect tension. Premature solutions. "Let's just forget it." Flight listening can feel like indifference, but it's often overwhelming, disguised as detachment. The nervous system is flooded, so the intellect evacuates. Reconnection requires grounding. Anchor to a shared fact or sensory cue. "Let's pause, I just want to understand one part before we move on." This signals safety and slows the pace, two antidotes to avoidance. The freeze listener, hearing through fog in freeze, listening collapses into numbing. Words arrive but cannot integrate. The listener feels stuck, unable to process or respond. Physiologically, energy drop. The body stills, eyes glaze, breath shallows. The system is trying to disappear, to minimize presence, to reduce impact. Freeze listeners often appear checked out. They may forget parts of the conversation or struggle to recall what was said moments earlier. Linguistic signs. Long pauses before answering. Repetitions. "Wait, what did you say?" Flat tone or effect. This isn't inattentiveness, it's shut down. The nervous system has prioritized survival over understanding. To meet a freeze listener, introduce gentle pacing and a non-demanding tone. "It's okay, take your time, I'm not rushing you." Safety returns through softness, not pressure. The fawn listener, hearing to please fawn, is the state of appeasement. The listener over-attunes to the speaker's mood, shape-shifting responses to avoid conflict. Every nod, every "you're right" is a small act of self-erasure. In this state, the nervous system equates harmony with survival. Disagreement feels dangerous, so the listener listens for cues on what to agree with, not what's true. Typical phrases: "You're totally right," "No, it's fine, I understand," "Whatever you want." While superficially cooperative, fawn listening blocks authentic dialogue. The speaker may feel validated, but the connection is hollow, built on compliance, not congruence. To exit fawn mode, invite shared responsibility for safety. "I want to be honest with you, but I also want us both to feel calm." This aligns truth with care, breaking the link between assertion and abandonment. State mismatch. When conversations cross wires, misunderstanding often arises not from disagreement, but from differing states. Imagine a fight listener debating a fawn listener. One seeks control, the other compliance. The result: a cycle of domination and depletion. Or a flight listener paired with a freeze listener. Both retreat. Silence swells. These combinations create communication dead zones. Fight plus fight leads to escalation. Fight plus fawn leads to a power imbalance. Flight plus freeze leads to disengagement. Fawn plus freeze leads to surface peace, inner unrest. Awareness is the first repair. Once we identify the pairing, we can regulate ourselves, rather than trying to regulate the other. Because every attempt to fix another state from defense only deepens the loop. Mirror linguistic decode. Words as weapons in conflict, language often becomes armor, sharpened for impact rather than understanding. Words, which once carried meaning, begin to carry memory, echoes of old arguments, old injuries, old defenses. What we say in those moments isn't simply dialogue, it's a map of our state. The nervous system doesn't choose words for elegance, it chooses them for efficiency. It wants safety fast, and so grammar collapses into strategy, the syntax of survival. When stress rises, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex reasoning and empathy, takes a backseat. The limbic system drives the conversation instead. Under this command, our syntax shortens, polarizes, and simplifies. We default to binary phrases because nuance feels unsafe. We want certainty, not subtlety, control, not curiosity. This is how stress manifests linguistically. Absolutes: you always, you never. Globalizing language: everything's ruined, nothing ever changes. Accusatory framing: you make me feel. You're just like. Each of these is a nervous system flare, a signal that precision has given way to protection. From the mirror linguistic hypothesis, such phrases aren't only about the other person. They are reflections, mirrors of the speaker's inner world. When I say, "You never listen," I might be revealing that I don't feel heard anywhere. The defensive sentence is both a projection and a plea. When grammar hardens, language becomes brittle when bodies do. The fight state produces clipped phrasing and fast tempo, syntax that punches. The flight state uses vagueness, syntax that evades. Freeze manifests in ellipses, trailing thoughts, and half-finished sentences. Fawn coats everything in politeness, syntax that pleases but conceals. These patterns are not random. They are the grammar of the body. The words flex to fit the form of fear. Consider two phrases: "You don't understand," "I'm struggling to feel understood." The first is accusatory, outward-facing. It challenges. The second is reflective, inward-facing. It reveals. The difference isn't semantics, it's safety. In the first, the speaker seeks control. In the second, connection. The mirror shift to practice mirror linguistic awareness is to slow the automatic phrasing long enough to ask, what am I trying to protect with this sentence? What truth is hiding behind this defense? Every reactive phrase has a core need concealed within it. "You're not listening" translates as "I need to feel considered." "You're so cold or mean" means I need warmth or reassurance. "You never care" means I need acknowledgement or empathy. When we decode the defense, we recover the request. This is the heart of NSL reframing, transforming protection into precision. We don't silence the feeling, we translate it. "You never care" becomes "I need more closeness right now." "You don't listen" becomes "I want to know my words matter." Such reframes invite co-regulation because they locate agency, shifting the focus from blame to belonging. The contagion of accusations spread like static. To the nervous system, tone is a threat. "You always" tells the listener, brace yourself. "You never" signals, prepare to defend. When we globalize behavior, we erase possibility. The conversation stops being about an instance and becomes about an identity. The accused no longer hears correction, they hear condemnation. In return, they may mirror the attack. "You're twisting everything." Now both bodies are defending, not decoding. This is the echo effect, one phrase of absolutism generating its mirror in response. The dialogue becomes recursive, looping between accusations until the original issue is unrecognizable. Breaking this cycle requires linguistic specificity. When X happened, I felt Y, and I need Z. This structure anchors communication in observable reality, slowing the nervous system's rush toward generalization. Receptivity through reframe. The nervous system relaxes in proportion to predictability. When sentences carry clarity, tone softens and comprehension improves. Notice the shift. You never listen reframes as, I'm not sure I feel heard right now. You're being rude reframes as, that tone feels sharp to me. You don't care reframes as, I'm needing some real. From projection to curiosity. The first step toward healing projection is curiosity, not correction. When we feel the impulse to accuse, we can pause and ask, could this statement also describe a part of me? Is this about their behavior or my fear of it? This isn't self-blame, it's self-reflection. The goal is not to invalidate perception, but to differentiate perception from projection. For instance, a partner's distraction might indeed feel hurtful, but if the hurt arrives amplified, carrying echoes of childhood dismissal, our nervous system may be responding to then, not now. Awareness loosens certainty. Certainty hardens defense. In the space between, dialogue reopens. The turn inward, self-blame as inverted projection. When projection feels too dangerous, when accusing risks abandonment, the psyche reverses direction. Rather than casting discomfort outward, it turns it inward. This is self-blame, the shadow folded back on itself. Where projection externalizes pain as accusation, self-blame internalizes pain as guilt. Both are attempts to restore order when something feels chaotic. In anxious fawn conditioning, this mechanism becomes chronic. As children, if love was conditional, we learned that peace required appeasement. Conflict was survived through apology, even for things beyond our control. I'm sorry became shorthand for please don't leave. By adulthood, the reflex persists. When disagreement arises, the body tenses, the voice softens, and the mind rehearses guilt. Not because we are at fault, but because assuming fault feels safer than enduring uncertainty. The superego and the inner courtroom. In psychoanalytic theory, the superego is the internalized voice of authority formed from parental correction and cultural expectation. Its purpose is conscience, its risk is cruelty. When overactive, the superego becomes a judge without mercy, replaying every interaction through the lens of moral perfectionism. You should have known better. You caused this. You failed again. This inner dialogue mimics the tone of early caregivers. In mirror linguistic terms, our inner courtroom speaks in borrowed voices, echoes of those who taught us what right sounded like. Each I'm sorry becomes an act of self-silencing, not restoration. The antidote isn't rebellion, but regulation. A calm body can discern between responsibility and rumination. Mirror neurons and hyperempathy mirror neurons, designed for empathy, can become overactive in individuals conditioned to fawn. The system attunes so intensely to others' discomfort that it absorbs it as personal guilt. This is the neurobiological basis for emotional contagion, feeling what isn't ours. We sense another's disappointment and assume causation. They're upset. I must have done something wrong. Here, empathy collapses into enmeshment. The boundary between I feel with you and I am responsible for you dissolves. Reclaiming sovereignty means learning to distinguish attunement from accountability. I can feel your sadness without assuming I caused it. This is the nervous system equivalent of cleaning a mirror, removing the fog of guilt, so reflection becomes accurate again. Cognitive distortions. The mind's shortcut self-blame thrives on personalization, a cognitive distortion in which the self becomes the default culprit. If someone is upset, it must be our fault. If a plan fails, we must have misstepped. But personalization is rarely true. It's training. For those raised in unpredictable environments, assuming blame was adaptive. It offered an illusion of control. If everything is my fault, then everything is fixable. Yet in adulthood, this logic backfires. It keeps us trapped in loops of apology and emotional labor, repairing relationships that were never truly broken, only misread. The practice is awareness. Am I taking ownership or am I taking over? Integration, from defense to discernment. Whether turned outward as accusation or inward as guilt, these mechanisms share a root, fear of disconnection. Projection says if I can locate the flaw in you, I can feel safe again. Self-blame says if I can fix the flaw in me, you won't leave. Both are strategies of emotional control, born from dysregulated safety systems. Healing begins when we replace certainty with curiosity, judgment with inquiry, and apology with awareness. In the mirror linguistic hypothesis, every defensive sentence can be decoded. Projection leads to disowned truth. Self-blame leads to an internalized voice. Our task is translation, bringing both back into dialogue with the self. Reflection prompt. The listening within when conflict stirs ask, am I hearing their words or my own history? Am I locating fault to restore control? What part of me feels unseen? And how might I acknowledge it without accusation? Listening begins when defense relaxes. Understanding begins when guilt softens. In that space, conversation becomes collaboration, and speech, once a weapon, becomes witness. Toward repair, we've traced the architecture of misunderstanding, how projection and self-blame weave the stories that block listening. Now awareness must become action. In the next part, we'll explore the three-step repair. we'll practice how to pause, paraphrase, and stay present, a real-time method for translating insight into interaction. Because understanding the pattern is only half the healing, repatterning it is the other half. Let's build the bridge back to connection. Integration practice, the 3-step repair, pause, paraphrase, presence. Every conversation carries the potential for rupture, not because we fail at communication, but because communication is an act of constant recalibration. Each word we speak is a hypothesis about what another mind might understand. Sometimes we guess well. Other times, our syntax misses the shape of their experience, and the connection bends. In those moments, the nervous system does what it always does when order slips. It reaches for control. We defend, explain, retreat, accuse, or apologize, hoping to restore equilibrium through force of will or flood of words. But coherence doesn't return through over-effort. It returns through repair. Repair isn't correction, it's reconnection. It's not about winning clarity. It's about regaining contact. This is the purpose of the 3-step repair, a nervous system method for returning to relational safety without abandoning truth. It's built on 3 movements. 1. Pause, regulate before responding. 2. Paraphrase, reflect what you heard, not what you fear. 3. Presence, reply from alignment, not alarm. Let's explore each step as both philosophy and practice. Step 1. Pause, regulation before resolution. Pause is the hinge upon which all understanding turns. Without it, the nervous system remains in charge of the conversation, dragging meaning through old pathways of threat and survival. The pause interrupts that loop. A single breath, deliberate, lengthened, can reset auditory focus, soften tone, and widen perception. In NSL, we call this the interoceptive anchor, the act of turning attention inward before transmitting outward. Why it matters. The pause tells the body, I am not in danger. It signals to the other person, you are not my enemy. It restores agency, shifting response from reflex to choice. Consider what typically happens in conflict. Words volley back and forth, each speaker reacting to the echo of their own fear. Pausing breaks this contagion. It communicates, I value understanding more than being understood first. Practical cues for the pause. Somatic. Unclench the jaw, drop shoulders, inhale through the nose for 4 counts, exhale through the mouth for 6. Linguistic. Use bridge phrases. Give me a second to take that in. I want to be sure I heard you. Energetic. Visualize both voices sharing the same space, not competing for it. This is not silence as withdrawal, it's silence as synaptic repair. You are not retreating, you are recalibrating. And often, in the space of that breath, the words you would have said out of defense are replaced by the ones your body actually means. Step 2. Paraphrase. Mirroring without management. Once regulated, we step into paraphrase. To paraphrase is not to perform agreement, it is to perform presence. It's how the nervous system says, I am listening now. Paraphrasing is a mirror act. It reflects what the speaker said in your own words, stripped of interpretation. It's how 2 realities negotiate alignment. Why it matters. It confirms comprehension. It slows the tempo. It reassures the speaker that their meaning is being handled with care. In NSL, a paraphrase is a co-regulatory cue. It lets the other body rest. When a person feels accurately mirrored, they stop arguing for existence. Example, you don't care about what I'm saying. It sounds like you're feeling dismissed, like your perspective isn't landing with me. This is not parroting. It's a translation. You are giving emotional language to what their body is broadcasting beneath the words. Why people resist paraphrasing? Because they confuse it with submission. But to mirror is not to concede. It's to clarify the playing field. Only once the other person feels seen can we introduce nuance or difference. In mirror linguistic terms, paraphrasing realigns reflection. In the echo chamber, distortion thrives. In clear mirrors, the message returns intact. If projection is autobiography, then paraphrase is cartography, mapping shared reality before we attempt to edit it. Practical tips for paraphrasing. Start with humility. Let me see if I've got this right. Keep tone low and cadence slow. Separate emotion from evaluation. I'm hearing you felt ignored, not you think I ignored you. Paraphrase transforms. You never listen into. You're trying to show me what's important to you. It's the art of hearing beneath hearing. Step 3. Presence. Responding from alignment, not alarm. After pausing and paraphrasing, we enter presence, the return to shared humanity. Presence is not performance. It is the willingness to remain open, congruent, and curious, even when differences remain unresolved. From an NSL lens, presence is the physiological state of ventral vagal regulation, heart rate stable, breath rhythmic, voice melodic. From a linguistic lens, presence is the syntax of sincerity, sentences rooted in I, phrased with accountability and paced for comprehension. From a psychological lens, presence is the antidote to projection, awareness that this person is not my past. This moment is not my memory. Presence says, I'm here and I'm not bracing. I can hold your truth without losing mine. We don't need agreement to find understanding. It's in this space that true dialogue begins, not as debate, but as mutual regulation. Presence requires courage to stay while discomfort softens, to listen when certainty wanes, to answer when silence invites avoidance. But it's also where repair becomes restoration, because every relational rupture is not a failure, it's a test of fluency. Can we speak from the body's truth rather than its fear? The spiral of repair, think of pause, paraphrase. Presence as a spiral, not a straight line. We cycle through them, sometimes multiple times in one conversation. We pause, realize we've misunderstood, paraphrase, sense tension rising, pause again, return to presence. Repair is recursive. Each turn through the spiral brings more coherence, more capacity, more compassion. With practice, the spiral shortens and fewer steps are needed before harmony returns. This is neuroplasticity in conversation, the rewiring of relational reflexes. Repair versus resolution. In many relationships, we confuse repair with resolution. Resolution is cognitive, agreement on facts or outcomes. Repair is somatic, restoration of safety, even when views diverge. You can repair without resolving. You can disagree and still be regulated together. The sign of repair is not consensus, it's softened bodies. Shoulders drop, breath lengthens, tone warms. In that shift, the connection reactivates. Meaning can wait, safety cannot. NSL in action, a dialogue rewritten. Let's apply this in practice. Scene. Two colleagues in disagreement. Person A, you never take my ideas seriously. Person B, that's not true, I always listen. In the old pattern, the exchange escalates. But with NSL awareness, step 1, pause. Person B notices tension, inhales. Ask yourself, when conflict rises, what do I prioritize, clarity or connection? Do I listen to fix or listen to feel? What does a repaired conversation feel like in my body? Repair is not about eloquence, it's about energetic honesty. A body that can stay steady through differences speaks fluently, even in silence, toward embodied resonance. We've now mapped the linguistic and relational architecture of repair, the movements that restore meaning when words fracture. But there's a subtler dimension still, one that travels beneath syntax, tone. Because before any word is understood, it's felt. In the next part, embodied resonance, tone as translator, we'll explore how prosody signals safety, how posture becomes punctuation, and how listening can be shaped not only by what we say, but by the music of our nervous system. Because often, what we call communication is simply the search for a tone that feels like home. Embodied resonance. Tone as translator. Before any word reaches the brain, it reaches the body. We don't first understand speech, we feel it. Tone, breath, and rhythm strike the nervous system like tuning forks, shaping emotional meaning before the intellect begins translation. In this way, tone is the first translator, the bridge between two internal states. It's how we detect intention beneath syntax, sincerity behind semantics, safety within silence. You can say I'm fine in a dozen ways. The nervous system decides which version to believe. Tone is more than melody. It's somatic data. It carries the physiological state of the speaker. Calm voices co-regulate. Strained voices transmit stress. Neutral words lose neutrality when delivered in the wrong register. This is why even factual statements can land as threats, and soft phrases can heal. The nervous system hears before the mind does. In polyvagal theory, Dr. Stephen Porges identifies the ventral vagal pathway as the circuit of social engagement. It's what allows us to hear human voice frequencies that signal safety, warm prosody, rhythmic cadence, gentle variation. Flat or sharp tones, by contrast, activate defensive circuits. They sound like an alarm, not an alliance. Before meaning, there is music. Our ears evolved to detect friend from foe through intonation, not grammar. The infant doesn't understand, you're safe, but recognizes it in the mother's timbre. So in every conversation, tone arrives first, words second. The listener's body begins reacting before their logic can intervene. When we forget this, we argue about semantics while the physiology is still screaming. In NSL, this means tone isn't decoration, it's regulation. Speech is a two-way broadcast of the state. Each word is an emotional signal carried on a physiological frequency. Prosody is proof of safety. Prosody, the rise and fall, rhythm and variation in voice, acts as an acoustic handshake between nervous systems. It tells others whether we're open or guarded, connected or contracted. A regulated voice is flexible, able to adjust volume, pitch and speed without losing coherence. A dysregulated voice is rigid, too fast, too loud, too flat, or too thin. We may say, I'm listening, but if tone is tight, the other person's body hears, I'm leaving. Proof of safety isn't what we say, it's how it sounds. The phrase, I care about you, spoken in a monotone, sounds like a duty. Whispered with tremor, it lands as fear. Spoken with warmth and slow breath, it lands as truth. So tone becomes a mirror of the state, and the state becomes the true message. The body speaks before we do from the mirror linguistic hypothesis. Tone is the pre-verbal grammar of the self. The nervous system constructs syntax before words appear. Every sigh, pause and emphasis is a form of embodied punctuation. Our tones reveal what our consciousness conceals. The raised pitch of anxiety says, please accept me. The clipped edges of irritation say, I need space. The softened cadence of care says, you're safe here. We can't edit tone with intellect alone, because tone originates deeper than thought. It's the nervous system's accent. When regulated, the accent of the self sounds like coherence. When dysregulated, it fragments, every sentence carrying micro-tremors of defense. This is why two people can say the same phrase, yet only one is believed. The body's truth always outpaces verbal truth. Listening posture, the physiology of presence tone doesn't exist in isolation. It's shaped by posture, breath, and attention. You can't sound regulated if you're physically braced. Listening begins not with the ear, but with the spine. The listening posture is an NSL technique for embodying curiosity. Eyes. Soften gaze, widen peripheral awareness. Jaw unclench, release micro-tension. Shoulders. Drop back and down, create space for breath. Breath. Inhale through nose 4, exhale longer, 6 to 8. Anchor. Feel both feet. Remember gravity. This posture signals both to self and others. I'm here. I'm not preparing to fight or flee. When two people hold this stance, tone naturally lowers, breath synchronizes, and words begin to resonate rather than ricochet. You're not only listening with your ears, you're listening with presence. Practice activity, the felt difference. Let's bring this into the body. No music, no external guidance, just you, your voice, and awareness. 1. Choose a neutral phrase, for example. I understand what you're saying. 2. Speak it twice, noticing the difference. Version A. Tense tone, shrug shoulders slightly upward. Narrow your eyes. Let breath stay shallow. Now say the phrase quickly, with clipped rhythm. Notice. How does it feel in your throat, chest, and gut? What message does it carry? Agreement or agitation? Version B. Regulated tone, drop shoulders, widen gaze. Take a full inhale. Exhale gently through the mouth. Now speak slowly, with rising and falling prosody. Notice, how does your body feel? What shifts in warmth, openness, or resonance? This experiment shows meaning is not fixed. It's filtered through physiology. Tone is the nervous system's subtitle. And when we change the music, the message rewrites itself. Mirror neurons. In training through sound, mirror neuron research reveals how we subconsciously mimic vocal tone and facial expression. We don't just interpret others, we resonate with them. This entrainment is the foundation of empathy and also contagion. When we speak from tension, we invite others into tension. When we speak from regulation, we invite others into calm. This is why tone is. We've explored tone as translator, the nervous system's grammar of belonging. We've learned that before the brain interprets, the body resonates. And that regulation is less about what we say, more about how we sound when saying it. Now in the closing whisper, from echo to understanding, we'll integrate the arc of this episode, moving from defensiveness to discernment, from hearing words to feeling truth, and preview our next exploration. Lost in translation, where we'll uncover how meaning misfires across culture, neurotypes, and emotional states, and how to restore coherence when language itself feels foreign. Because listening deeply isn't about decoding every word, it's about recognizing when tone becomes truth. Closing whisper. From echo to understanding, every argument we've ever had, every misunderstanding we've tried to navigate, every you never listen, or you always do this. Beneath all of it, there's usually the same question waiting quietly underneath the noise. Can you hear me, even when I'm hurting? This is the pulse beneath all language. Not just the words exchanged, but the emotional contract each conversation tries to re-establish. Am I still seen, safe, and significant here? When people stop listening to each other, it's rarely because they don't care. It's because they're protecting something, their story, their safety, their self-image. And protection in its urgency can sound like certainty, but certainty rarely coexists with curiosity. Listening requires risk. It asks us to suspend the self, not abandon it, but soften its edges long enough to let another reality touch ours. It's not about agreeing, or even understanding everything. It's about staying regulated long enough to witness the truth of another nervous system without needing to rewrite it. In this episode, we've traveled through the architecture of misunderstanding, how the echo chamber of the mind distorts intention, how defense scripts replace dialogue, how projection and self-blame weave twin illusions of fault, and how repair, paraphrasing, and tone can restore what language alone can't. Now we stand at the integration point, where understanding isn't a conclusion, but a practice. Because listening is not an act of intellect, it's an act of regulation. And what the mind calls hearing, the body calls safety. From defending to discerning, when we defend, we listen only for threats. Every sentence becomes a test. Every word becomes potential proof of danger. Defense creates a filter. It shrinks the range of what we're able to hear. Our focus narrows to find contradiction, to protect the image of being right, or to avoid the feeling of being wrong. But discernment is different. Discernment doesn't fight reality. It feels it fully. It knows that not every discomfort is a danger, and not every critique is a condemnation. To discern is to hold nuance, to sense the layers of what's being said and what's being meant. It's the difference between hearing an attack and recognizing an alarm, between reacting to tone and wondering what tone is protecting. Discernment listens with context, not just content. It doesn't seek to fix, it seeks to frame accurately. We build discernment through regulation. A calm body can translate complexity. A tense one can only translate threat, so when you feel the urge to defend, try this small shift. Instead of asking, how do I respond, ask, what might this person be trying to preserve? That single question turns an argument into an inquiry. An inquiry is the language of connection. From reacting to reflecting, reactivity is fast. It's the nervous system's reflex, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response translated into words. Reflection is slow. It's the pause that lets the body breathe before the mouth moves. In many of our relationships, the issue isn't that we don't listen, it's that we listen while triggered. We process words through histories of rejection, trauma, dismissal, and defense. When someone says, "You never listen," they're not describing a single moment. They're naming a pattern of emotional absence. They're saying, when I need to feel met, I meet your reflex instead of your presence. Reflection breaks that loop. It gives the self time to distinguish the present conversation from past echoes. It lets us ask, is my body in 2025 or in childhood? Am I hearing their voice or my memory's voice? Am I trying to win or to understand? Reflection requires humility, the willingness to admit that what we first feel is not always what's fully real. It doesn't invalidate emotion, it refines perception. And reflection, repeated often enough, becomes trust. The nervous system learns, I can stay, I can listen. I don't have to disappear or dominate to feel safe. That is where relational maturity begins, from hearing words to feeling truth. Most communication doesn't fail because people use the wrong words. It fails because the energy beneath the words feels unsafe. Truth isn't only a matter of accuracy, it's a matter of alignment. We know when someone's words don't match their tone, their eyes, or their breath. We call it mixed signals, but it's really just the body refusing to believe a sentence that the nervous system can't back. When we feel truth, what we're detecting is coherence, body tone, and word resonating together. In mirror linguistic terms, alignment is audible. We trust what we can sense as congruent. So the task of authentic communication isn't eloquence, it's integration. When what you say and how you sound, and how you feel, line up, people don't just hear you, they experience you as real. And in turn, when you meet someone who speaks with coherence, even if they disagree with you, you sense safety. Because your body recognizes their honesty, even if your ego resists their idea. That's the paradox of communication. The nervous system doesn't need agreement to feel secure. It needs consistency. The inner listener, you never listen, isn't always addressed to another person. Sometimes it's the body speaking to the mind. Every time we override exhaustion, minimize emotion, or silence intuition, the body whispers, you're not listening to me. Internal listening is the foundation of external listening. A person who can't hear their own limits will struggle to hear others' needs. If you want to become a better listener, start with the conversations inside. Notice how your body says no before your mouth does. Notice how stress changes your tone. Notice what feelings you edit out mid-sentence. Listening outward begins with honoring inward. Because self-silencing and miscommunication are twins, one turns away from the self, the other from the other. When you bring attention back to your inner voice, not the critic, but the communicator, you build fluency in empathy. You stop expecting others to hear what you keep muttering. And slowly, the sentence, you never listen, stops describing your relationships, because it no longer describes your relationship with yourself. The nervous system's apology listening is the body's apology for years of mishearing. It's how we repair the harm caused by rushing to respond before we've truly received. When you listen deeply, you're telling the other person and your own nervous system that survival no longer has to hijack understanding. It's a declaration of maturity. I can tolerate your truth without losing my own. And that is what a true apology looks like in communication, not words of regret, but acts of regulation. To listen without interrupting, to breathe through defensiveness, to stay long enough to let meaning emerge, not be imposed. It's in that space that language becomes more than sound, it becomes sanctuary. Integrating the journey over this episode, we've unpacked not only how to hear, but how to be heard. We've recognized that listening is a physiological skill, not just a moral one. Projection distorts perception, and self-blame constricts voice. Repair is recursive, and tone is translation. And understanding isn't the end, it's the beginning of authentic dialogue. Every listener becomes a mirror, and every speaker, a reflection. The more regulated the mirror, the clearer the image. This is the essence of mirror talk, learning to use language as a nervous system instrument, not to perform empathy, but to embody resonance. So as you move back into your daily conversations, try to carry this awareness. Every word you speak is a wave, every tone a tide, every pause a shoreline where understanding can land. And when misunderstanding rises, remember, repair doesn't begin with the right word. It begins with the right state. Because fluency is not found in vocabulary, it's found in regulation, the human conversation. We're here to understand it, to see that most of what we call communication is really translation, of safety, of memory, of need. If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. Listening begins where defense ends. And repair begins not with agreement, but with acknowledgement. Every relationship you have, personal, professional, intimate, familial, is a conversation between nervous systems learning to trust again. And every time you pause, paraphrase, and speak with presence, you model a new grammar of grace. The path ahead. As we close, I want to invite you into next week's reflection. Our next episode is called Lost in Translation, a deep dive into miscommunication across difference, neurotypes, cultures, emotional states, and lived experiences. We'll explore why the same word can hold different worlds, why logic sometimes fails where empathy succeeds, and how to create coherence when meaning misfires. If today was about hearing beyond defense, the next episode is about understanding beyond similarity. Until then, remember, you don't need perfect phrasing to be present. You just need a steady tone, a curious heart, and a willingness to hear what's really being said in yourself and in others. So take a breath, lower your shoulders, and as you move through the world this week, listen, not for agreement, but for resonance. You've been listening to Mirror Talk, the language of the nervous system. I'm James Miller.